Greetings, I'm Dike Rostant. Welcome back to the TTT News. The UWI recently concluded their campus council meetings, and to discuss some of those outcomes and the future of the St. Augustine campus in general, we are joined by Pro Vice-Chancellor and Campus Principal, Professor Brian Copeland. A light rising out of the west. Welcome, Prof. How are you and how are things at the UWI?
I'm fine, Dike. At UWI, we are looking enthusiastically to the future. It's never 100%, but we are there, we are engaged, and anxious, as I said, enthusiastic to looking at this post-COVID world. Well, we're close to post-COVID, I would guess. Yeah.
Definitely. And in terms of looking at the future, and I like the fact that you say, well, things are never as ideal as we'd want them to be. But what are some of those things that you're really looking forward to specifically for the St. Augustine campus in the future?
Okay, so at the council meeting, I outlined 8 focal areas where that we will target for the UWI to go to by the year 2030. I just speak to a couple of them here because I know that time is a constraint. But first and foremost is how are we going to deliver? And COVID has taught us that we have to exist in a hybrid delivery mode. If even to ensure that if we have to switch back to an emergency, we can basically switch to online delivery. Or would you believe if there's a problem that occurs in the online environment, and I don't think I see many people speaking about that. Technology could take a hit. We can go fully back to face-to-face. So we're speaking of a spectrum of delivery that goes from fully face-to-face to fully online. And one example of that is something that I understand people are calling high flex, where you can actually do both. You can sit with a small segment of your class in front of you, but at the same time, you are delivering online. It's something actually many are doing right now without knowing it, and it's been around for about 30 years. The DB campus has been set up for that high flex mode. But we also look at a global market because we have reached the limit, I think, in terms of what we can deliver to the Caribbean population. There's a bit of a saturation in some of the markets, and that affects us as well as it does affect, of course, the Caribbean as well. And so we look at a global market that will help us to grow our institution and provide a buffer so that we can do what we were set up to do, which is provide teaching and learning for the Caribbean region. And to do that, we are looking at, of course, quality delivery when it comes to teaching and learning, which is one of our main functions, and quality research and scholarship, which is the second main function at the university, one that many people they're aware of it, but they're not really sure of what it entails. Teaching and learning dominates the minds of most of the population. And just to wrap this up, to empower that, we are currently in the process of looking at our processes. Sorry to double up on the words there, but they have to be efficient and agile. We know that very well, and as I indicated, we've started it by actually process mapping the University of West Indies. I don't know of any university that has actually done that. We're looking at the financial model, the funding model, which has to be designed for sustainability. And then, of course, supporting all of that, we have to have staff who are well prepared and fully engaged for the future. So those are the 8 facets or 8 focal areas that we see that are critical importance to the U of the future. And the campus has started already to embark upon moving to those, that 8-dimensional target, if you like.
And I really like the fact that you appreciate the fact that you're talking about this process mapping, but that kind of praxis in terms of like thinking about it, then looking at actions, but doing it real time. Is that something that has there's a little more speed or a little more drive to it now? Because I know sometimes when you're changing a curriculum, you try to do it in increments so that there are little tweaks and little tweaks and little tweaks and little tweaks. So when you finish, it looks very different from how it started. Is that something that is going to be compressed a little more now at the UWI St. Augustine campus?
Time is not on our side, Dike. It's not on our side at all. And so, unfortunately, we do have to move with uncharacteristic speed. Universities are not generally known for speed, but unfortunately, COVID has said, you better move fast or you'll die. So yes, curriculum changes could be done quickly. Actually, we've managed to design a curriculum and get it out there in a matter of 4 to 6 months. So you see, it's one, the intention is there. I think that was the MSc in Petroleum Studies, which was getting funding from the industry many years ago. It's not even now. So it is possible to move quickly. We just have to have the will to do it. Academics tend to discuss things a lot and throw ideas around, and everybody has an opinion, which is fine. That is the collegiate manner, but unfortunately, in some circumstances, speed is of the utmost. We have to do that. You have no choice.
And you said that time is not on your side right about now. What are some of the other challenges that the UWI is facing at this point in time?
Yeah, DK, we have been actually before COVID, we have had to face the challenge of dwindling funding. And that started more than 6 or 7 years ago. I remember as a dean, I was dean principal. We were asked to take 1 year $40 million out, another 40. We took out $100 million out of our expenditure over the last 6 years. I think in a way it was a good thing because it has forced us to ask questions about who we are and what we are and how should we achieve the targets that we have set. And that eight-point plan that I mentioned earlier actually came from some of that deep dive. But essentially, the main challenge has been funding, and you've heard some discussions about tuition fees and so on. It is one of the prime problems we have. And then from that, the whole issue is about structure and framework that really needs to be redesigned for a new world. If we go to that when we go to that global market, we cannot afford to be making all too many mistakes. We have to have a more of a customer sort of focus and orientation when treating with that student body. And therefore, it means that we also have to improve our engagement with the students who are here locally and regionally as well. The whole change in thinking. And I got a lot of flack for this. I've told my staff, this is a business. We're not into the bottom line as regular businesses are, but our operations, our engagement has to be very business-like if we're serious about what it is we want to do. So one of the main challenges then, apart from the funding, is really the culture change. We have to make a radical shift, a transformation, if you like, fundamental change to our people and our thinking. The same processes I spoke of as well. We have to basically almost ditch the old and reinvent the space. Our tools and the technology we use, we are actually right now on a digital transformation drive across all of the UE because we have to successfully pivot to that campus of tomorrow. Major problem will be culture, as you well know, because we're talking about people.
And I really want to continue with the conversation looking at that transformational leadership that you're speaking to, both from where you sit at the helm, as well as UWI's position in the landscape of education in Trinidad and Tobago, in the region, and even further afield. But we do that when we return. We're speaking with Pro Vice-Chancellor and Principal of the St. Augustine Campus, Professor Brian Copeland. Stay with us. We return with more. Welcome back. We are going in depth on the future of the UWI with Pro Vice-Chancellor and the Principal of the St. Augustine Campus, Professor Brian Copeland. Now, just before we took the break, Professor, you were speaking about cultural shifts. And just before we go back into that, coping with the financial challenges, what are some of those incremental points that you say, okay, well, we need to address these things in order to move forward?
Okay, so if you look at UWI's income, it arises from different sources. The major one, of course, is tuition. And right now, the university is operating on what we call an 80-20 model, which means that what we call tuition is really just 20% of the economic cost on a student basis. So as an example, engineering, is the most expensive of what we call the CGC programs. I need to explain a bit more that we have groups of courses. The largest group is what we call CGC courses, Campus Grants Committee suite of courses, around which the university was actually designed. So those are the majority of the courses. We have medical sciences. We also have now self-financing courses where the full economic course is taken up by the student. So the CGC program is the one where we are really challenged in terms of the financing because the government theoretically is supposed to provide 80% of that economic cost as subventions, but governments across the Caribbean are being increasingly challenged. If you go to Jamaica, I don't think government is covering more than 40% of the cost there. And basically, as I said, they're all challenged. And so as a university that has a mandate to achieve, and to achieve that mandate, it has to grow, quite frankly. How do you treat with that? So we look at our income streams. Tuition is one. Well, we've been speaking about, okay, let's take a look at tuition levels, which have not changed for 21 years. We also have other income that comes from commercial activities. We have vendors on campus. We engage in all kinds of commercial activities to help secure and support the campus. And we also have income from special projects, such as research projects, usually funding from different agencies internationally. And in fact, we are a very good pivot point for the EU when it comes to looking at research projects, looking at specific issues and so on. And most recently, what we have done is develop an innovation and entrepreneurship stream of activity, which once it matures, we'll see a steady stream of small and medium enterprises coming out of the University of the West Indies. And this is all of the campuses, driven by the potentially innovative ideas of staff and students and John and Jane public. We are not good at this point in time as a country, as countries in the region, in moving ideation, ideas generated by individuals into the commercial space. And I have indicated to our students that essentially, taking my phone off, that essentially we have to get to a space where I've actually given them a year, 2034. I need to see the creation of a strong SME sector that is driven by them as students of the graduates of the University of West Indies, and which is built around which those companies are built around the ideas that are generated at the University of West Indies, even as we try to support existing companies to become much more competitive. So it's quite a mouthful. There's a whole range of activities. Some of them are very new, and so they need some time. There is one project we started on. I did say we have to go global. Well, we sounded that clarion call very early during my time as principal. 3 years ago or more, we started to speak about a global school of medicine to be built at Dike. Now, when I look at the figures, the estimates that I've gotten suggest that when that gets going and it reaches something like, I think, 160 students per year intake over 4 years, and it's full fee paying students, we should be able to cover about 25% of our expenditure that exists right now. So there's a whole range of activities. Quite frankly, if you were to stay from afar, you would swear that UWI is a business, but we are. We have to survive. We have to show a balanced budget at the end of the year. Anything that's negative is a no-no. And so zero and positive is fine, but we're not striving as hard as the corporate sector would be for that bottom line. Our aim is to get students out the door and to provide the kind of research that is required to support the development and growth of our nations in the Caribbean.
And I'm so glad that you raised that point. You call it a mouthful, but I think it was necessary, Prof, because one of the things that I appreciate about you is the fact that, yes, you're an academic, but at the same time, you're also looking at the private sector, and things need to make sense certain ways. So even looking at the fact that the UWI was involved in looking at open source blueprints for certain things, and with regard to the COVID-19 pandemic, and looking at the fact that saying what role can the UWI play in this situation that is happening around us. so that research goes towards that, as opposed to saying, well, research is being done and it will be published and it will be put into a book and it will be in a tome collecting dust, as opposed to saying, what can this research do for the society that it is in now? As opposed to saying, okay, well, yes, we're churning out a set of people, they're bright, but can they function in the society? What are they going to do after they leave the hallowed halls of the UWI? And I'm really appreciative that I hear you talking about things going towards that, because I think a knock on many persons coming out, and not just UWI, because I've heard it, but other tertiary institutions, yes, the person bright, but can they function? This is something that Pat Bishop has spoken about in terms of like, what can you do? Earl Lovelace saying, what will we do with what we've done? So in terms of saying, bridging that gap and saying, okay, well, we can see definite ways that gaps and holes can be plugged by the UWI. It seems as though this is something that you're working on to make sure that people also turn to the UE, as opposed to saying, exactly, I wonder who we could get to do this, boy.
Exactly. And as I said in council, we are of, for, and by the society, and we tend to forget that. And we have to make that delivery. I've spent my whole career trying to engage colleagues in that. The university culture was adopted from a 1,000-year-old mold that exists. We are a descendant of the University of London, and we adopted and accepted a lot of the mores that they had, but time has changed. And if you check out the history of universities, they served the environment. And I think we sort of got, I don't want to say lost, but we kind of, yes, we lost the script a little bit, because yes, many academics just love to do the research and nose down into eking out new knowledge and writing about it and getting the kudos and so on. But you have to deliver to the society in which you are planted, or else it's meaningless. It's meaningless. So I've lived my whole life thinking that way.
And it's something that, there's a term that I use sometimes, I call it inner standing. So yes, you use the knowledge that you have, but at the same time, going through that process of knowledge acquisition, you're using it to say, how can I apply it to this situation that I'm from to make it better? But I think...
that is, I'm sorry, that is how the first world operates, without even knowing it, I have to say. And if you read the literature, it's clear that many don't understand, even in the first world, that nexus between the university and its culture and the ability of the society to survive and to thrive and to have innovative ideas going forward. It might seem as if it is, you look at all the movies and so on, and people talk about it. But I have colleagues out there, and many are lost as to where they are in that space. It's in fact still a focal point for some researchers. We find everything to research and write about. So we need to get to that. And there's one point that I think we need to add to what you said. Those SME, that SME sector that I've been seeing should be a game changer for economy. So it's a new economy we're creating. We should be creating nationally. I say should be, because there's so much to change, there's so much culture to change and address. It's based on having a swarm of these SMEs. Now think of it. I've been told by persons in the know, persons from the UN, for example, when they're looking at the world of work, that everything's going to get computerized and digitized and all that stuff. And I'm saying, okay, where do all the humans go? And their answer is always, well, they'll be in the back rooms, doing all the improvements in the technology that drives the robots and so on in the factories and all that stuff. And then I'm an electrical engineer. I've actually worked with my students. We built our digital electronics program from zero.
And on that, building it from zero, I think we can't put all the new wine into this wineskin because we run out of time for this conversation. But hopefully that just means that we have further installments along the road. We want to thank you very much, Professor Brian Copeland, Pro Vice-Chancellor and Campus Principal of the UWI St. Augustine campus, looking at the future of UE and this very exciting stuff. Hope to have another conversation with you very soon. And on behalf of the entire news team, I'm Dike Rostant. This has been In Depth. Thank you for joining us.